Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you to this Pitzer at Home. We are so glad to have you join us this evening. Pitzer at Home offers us an excellent opportunity to bring Pitzer to you at home, where we can all participate in intellectually inquisitive discussions and connect with fellow Pitzer College community members. My name is Jill Hawthorne. I'm class of '87, and my role at Pitzer is Associate Director of Engagement and Campus Partnerships. Please note that this event will be recorded and available on the Pitzer at Home website. Tonight, Pitzer is so pleased and honored to host this Alumni and Family Book Club talk with Eli Hastings, class of 2000, and Assistant Professor Emerita Jackie Levering Sullivan. Eli describes himself as, quote, a father, author, psychotherapist, and anti-fascist, not necessarily in that order, end quote. His books reflect the sorrows of trauma and struggles that have affected those he loves the most. In his work as a therapist, he focuses on trauma and healing. Jackie arrived at Pitzer in 1984, and as you may know, she met Jack Sullivan, Pitzer Professor of Political Studies, who she married 1 year later. Jackie is an author and an artist. She founded the Pitzer Writing Center, taught writing, and mentored countless students. Jackie and Jack Sullivan regularly had Pitzer students to their home in Claremont, and many stay in touch with Jackie, even today. And today, we chose this date because it's the 7th anniversary of Jack's passing. And although a very hard day to have, a great opportunity for us all to be together and celebrate his life. For me, this has been a unique project of love and sincere affection. Jackie and I share a heartfelt connection around our love for Jack Sullivan. As the first in my family to attend college, Jack was my professor, advisor, and champion, allowing me to be a research assistant, conduct an independent study with him, and understand the principles of negotiating conflict. He became one of my closest life mentors, and he was a part of the conversation each time Eli, Jackie, and I met in planning this program. And so at this time, I would like to turn the floor over to Eli and Jackie.
Welcome, everyone. I am so delighted to be here with Eli and to talk about his book. We have so much to talk about, and I hope that you will stay with us through the whole thing. And I would like to say a few words about Eli and his book. Eli was a student of mine, and I actually have all my old grade books, and I looked through them today. And actually, you got A's in all your classes, Eli. And of course, we've stayed in touch. And when this book first came out in 2013, I brought Eli down to do a reading here at Pitzer. So, and I'm so glad that on a day that is special and also at the same time tough for me, that I can spend the evening with Eli.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks everybody for coming. It's kind of bizarre. I can't see any of you, your cameras or anything. I'm reading some names here, so I won't. Well, hi Alice, hi Jose. Those are the two that I recognize at the moment. I'm glad you guys are here. I'm really humbled and moved to get to sit here with you guys tonight and share a little bit about well, whatever comes up in my conversation with Jackie Sullivan, but particularly around Pitzer, memoir, trauma, and whatever might be interesting about my trajectory since Pitzer and since Jackie gave birth to my writing talent.
That's really nice of you to say that. That makes up for the line in the book.
Oh, well, don't worry, Jackie. I'm going to read that line. So.
I know. Okay. I think, Eli, you can go ahead and do your first reading.
Yeah. So my belief about from my time, so a million years ago, actually launching this book and doing a lot of these sorts of things, is that there's nothing more important than just sort of stepping into the story. So I'm going to read you guys a few excerpts from the beginning of the book, first half of the book, and then later on I'll read you a couple from the end. I guess I should say that I don't know that everyone here has any idea like what exactly this book is about. Most of you probably do, but it sort of is a memoir chronicle of over about 10 years of my relationship with my best friend and sometimes lover, who I met at Pitzer College. The first time I saw her, I was scared of her. I wonder if it showed. She was sitting in the corner of a cinder block dorm room. Y'all probably don't have those anymore. She smokes furiously, not fast, but with drags that seem lethal. She's silent and her eyes are purple and bagged, like they've weathered a storm. Her South Indian skin is as dark as her pupils. She watches us severely. I try to tell myself that she is clearly a hamper on the good times we've planned with our friends that have arrived at Pitzer, and that I don't give a shit what she thinks. But these falsities evaporate every time I feel her aloof gaze hit me. Soon the silver dollar sun is halfway dropped, shadows are growing, and someone has produced malt liquor. We are in a dorm room next to Jay's that has been abandoned in typical private college fashion. The administration has not yet noticed that spoiled teenagers are turning it into a den of vice. Someone scrawls a quote on the wall and I follow the lead. I rise with drunken steadiness in the dying sunlight that leaks in through the window from over Sarala's shoulder. And I slash a large rest in peace for a dead friend across the east wall. I tell myself I'm eulogizing my dead friend, but I'm also thinking that this might gain me Sarala's attention, and it works. Within moments, she touches me for the first time, gives up her drawn pose on the desk chair, eases near and puts a cool palm on my neck. She tells me with that touch that I am allowed in. I feel good fortune open in my chest. It is a weekday and Sarala and I escape for a meal, both of us fed up with our unhealthy love affairs. This time we do better than Denny's. St. Charles, a cafe with high booths and a Cajun theme. We drink beers at midday. I remember sitting outside, the sun a welcome sensation after long, wet days. We are doing writing exercises, something that our odd, beloved creative writing professor has pushed on us like a flu shot. The scratch of her blue pen gets urgent. Her brow is furrowed and locks of hair are hanging down over it, escaping the big sunglasses that hold most of the bangs to the top of her head. She bites her lip once hard, I can tell, because a ridge of caramel flesh is white from the dent of her teeth. Then she pauses and curses in a way that is supposed to be sardonic, but I know is actually somewhere nearer to happy. Fucking A. She holds up a leaf of notebook paper by the corner and lets the breeze rattle it. This is what we got, Eli. This is it. She shakes the paper. Painters have these big, heavy canvases, texture and color. Musicians have pounds of material hanging from them, and they beat their art right out into the world with it and watch how it affects people right there. Right fucking in front of them. She wags her head and slaps the paper down, reaches for a smoke. All we've got are these flimsy fucking pieces of paper. Weightless. They'll fly away, quiet, fast, and easy. We got it rough. We climb back into Desert Storm. That's a Corolla, 92 Corolla. We light cigarettes and tear down Route 66 with guitar banging on the radio, and we smile because we find that fleeting intermission of freedom again before the reality of Pitzer swallows us. As we round the last turn, she fiddles with the radio. I feel like the idea got into my head a fraction of a second before the tune did. I can see clearly now, just starting up once again. We look at each other and smile and don't need to say a thing. I don't know if Pitzer still does senior projects in the same way that they did back in the day, but this excerpt is clearly from Sarala's senior project presentation. Sarala had never showed nervousness per se, only anxiety, and she didn't acknowledge it the night of her avant-garde thesis defense. She just acted pissed off and smoked with a violent hand. I'm falling all over myself to be supportive, and I help her and to help her, but there's nothing, she says shortly. So dumbly, I go buy her flowers. I catch up to her a few minutes later before it starts, and she grabs them out of my hands. You fucking idiot, you're not supposed to buy me flowers. It hurts, even though I understand she's just undone, as well as I understand that buying her flowers was a dumb thing to do. I lean against the chain link fence outside the presentation hall and look away up to the smoke-cloaked mountains. Her face reforms around a conciliatory smile as she takes the time to hug me. Then she drags the bouquet away in a death grip upside down. The big room is packed, the floor covered with butcher paper, microphones in different corners, tubes of paint and brushes, projector and screen in the center, huge woofer speakers against the wall. The faculty members are seated at their card table, smiling anticipatorily. Sarala rises from her own table and grasps a microphone hard enough that no one can tell she's shaking. I hear it in her voice, though, and happily count it as evidence that I know her best. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing tonight is basically slicing together all these film strips of my work based upon or in response to whatever y'all are doing. Not a lot of preamble, no outgoing filmmaker poet speech, no nostalgia. Then she sits, the lights go down, the beat drops, and a lot of kids on a lot of drugs go at the room. Shirtless hippies smear their torsos with acrylics and roll across the floor. A crew of ravers start their weird dancing. The faculty smiles and scribbles. Jay, who wants her to know that he still cares, kicks the first freestyle raps. And she goes to work, head down, fingers flying, weaving a film strip of catched footage to the rhythm of the present madness she has invited. There's a part of me that thinks she conjured this project as a cloaked scoff at Pitzer, at the fetish of interpretive, cutting-edge art that people in liberal arts schools tend to wax grandiose about. On the other hand, maybe it was real inspiration, a piece of evidence that despite her derision of the world she inhabited, she was very much of it, as an artist at least. I don't know because I don't remember the final film strip. I just sat watching her through her discomfort and her art, feeling proud as hell because I had some nascent notion of just how tough it was to stand under the acid burn of the limelight, believing all her scars and bruises visible, to simply be public, to be gracious, to be wide open by way of art.
Well, of course, one of the words, the lines that has always struck me, and I have it marked, is on page 77 when you talk about despite her derision of the world. I knew the real person that we're talking about. I was one of those faculty members in that room. I was her thesis advisor along with the poet Doug Anderson, who taught here at Pitzer for a while. And I think probably we saw it differently. I remember Doug and I were very excited about what she presented. We were absolutely, in my British friends' slang, gobsmacked by what she did and what she presented. I had great affection for her, and I always thought and hoped that her writing would save her. But well, if you've read the book, you know the journey she took. So maybe Eli, you can talk a little bit about why she was so willing to often risk so much, and yet I had the feeling often that what she left unsaid was more important than what she actually said.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You know, I feel like, you know, any commentary that I make upon, you know, about the sources, I was going to say etiology because I'm a psychologist now, and that's not a good word. The sources of her suffering and her pain. I want to first say this, which is evident if I think if you read the book, which is that I'm gonna just use her name because it feels more authentic. Versus Sarala, her name was loved more purely and more ferociously than anyone I've ever known in my life. You know, she didn't have a large circle of friends, but if you were inside of that circle of friends, you had somebody that was going to, as the parlance has evolved, you know, ride or die for you. And that incredible love is what was most remarkable about. But you know, to her derision of the world and to her darkness that she was well absorbed by when I met her, you know, there's a few things, a couple, maybe three things that I'll mention. And you know, the question of like, what was this curse on her? What was the curse of her suffering is really central to the book. So that's the whole exploration.
Right.
But, you know, to sort of enumerate it, you know, I would, at this point, looking back, you know, though I was skeptical about this when I wrote the book, looking back as a clinician now, particularly, you know, she certainly suffered from a very severe case of bipolar 1 disorder. However, there was also, and I don't know when this began for her. I never knew because she left things unsaid. There's a lot of complex trauma. There was a lot of very terrible things that happened to her. And, you know, as a psychotherapist and a trauma therapist, now I can say that, you know, what people often do when they go through a terribly traumatic experience, particularly sexual assault, is sometimes to create the conditions to relive that experience as an attempt to, you're in the dark.
I know.
As an attempt to sort of heal and gain mastery over that experience. So I think there was a lot of that going on. And, you know, she identified immediately, I think, upon beginning to use heroin, with broken people, and as she would say, and she viewed herself as a broken person, and she believed she belonged among them, and a lot of them hurt her a lot and perpetuated the suffering that she had. However, whatever it was, you know, the profundity of her suffering was remarkable. I mean, talking about somebody who could sleep maybe 5 hours a week. And if anyone's ever suffered sleep deprivation, they can imagine what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
Having said all that, you know, my youthful, maybe naive, but it's still with me, gut feeling and or truth is that struggle was something deeply spiritual. And she believed that. She believed that she was born into this life and to suffer. And suffer as she did.
Well, this is kind of a, you know, a little bit off the subject, but I'm just curious, was this relationship and the experience, was this part of the reason that you became a psychotherapist?
Yeah. You're sharp, Jackie, and you're getting ahead of me. But yeah, absolutely. Probably, you know, a large portion of why.
Yeah. Well, I remember, and I may have the foggy memory of it, but when I was looking at my great books, by the way, I found out that you and did an independent study with me together once. I think there were 2 other people. And did we do that at our house?
Yes, we did.
That's what I thought. My memory is of sitting around my dining room table.
Yeah.
Right. And those
But
were
we could both be wrong, but I think we're right.
well, you know, those are some of my best memories. And they were very pleasant evenings and a lot of great work. And, you know, and, you know, now that I'm so glad we've kept touch because, you know, you're right. You did something with your writing, and that makes me feel proud and happy, and it gives me great memories of being at Pitzer and why I so love teaching here.
Well, allow me to say that, you know, it was not emphasized in the book, and you know, enough for editorial reasons, I guess. But you know, you were an incredibly important person, as was Jack, and you know, as I consider it now, it's like with you and with me and with Jack, I think, and with Doug, right? She was among people who accepted her darkness. They accepted her suffering. It was the struggle was palpable to all of us, right? And we respected it, and we could see it. And she didn't come from a place where that was true. She did not come from a place where it was acceptable, frankly. And so, you know, the healing power of those times with you and with Jack is immense.
That's really good to know.
Yeah.
Maybe Jill, should we have Eli do some more reading?
Certainly. Yes, that's great.
Okay. You guys are going to see that this is the reason why this book looks this way is because it's the only copy I have of this book.
Really?
Yeah, really. I mean, it feels like a million years ago, you know. I don't want to bore people by talking about the process of getting this book written and published, but my God, it was era, and then it ended, and then I've moved on from it. But I'm glad to be back with it. Okay, so I'm just going to read a little bit from the last part of the book, though certainly not the very, very end. So I should say this takes place in Seattle. So that's the night. Lewis is playing a blues show at an Irish bar in Capitol Hill with an old bandmate. The bar is crowded with strangers as well as blasts from the past for me. I say I'm going to the bar. Give me a triple Jack, says, holding up 3 fingers. When Lewis and his bandmate start up the thumping blues, we all migrate to the front of the crowd. The music is funky and sweet. It brings the place to life. No overdone, weepy ballads of heartbreak, just up-tempo funk and rhythm. I managed to get down a few beers in that short period, and by the time Lewis is available for me to slap on the back, I find the world a bit off kilter. And then comes to me and she says, listen, I need to go to 2nd and Pike. the dark heart of the neighborhood where I've asked her not to go, especially at night. This decision is the most unwelcome of any scenario. I tell her I'm in no shape to drive and I don't want her to go. But I'm yielding, I'm not angry, I'm not pleading. I'm kind and I'm clear. She tells me it's fine, that she'll go in a cab. When the taxi pulls up, I walk out with her and give her a key to my house. I say to be careful. She says she will. Then she'll see me at home. I kiss her, and before she turns and climbs into that car, she looks into my face, green contacts catching the vapor lights. For a long moment, she just smiles. Did I help her die? Did the way I loved her give her permission? Could I have stopped it? And if so, should I have stopped it? If I, her best friend, had ever confronted her with the clear hypothesis of the cycle, shame, self-hatred, abuse, addiction, would it have gotten through and put her on a new path? In short, should I be haunted by the sweet kiss and broad smile she gave me that night on a rainy Seattle sidewalk on her way off to the end? But I find I'm no longer much pained by that question, since I spent 4 weeks in a little room in an artist studio, looking out at a Vermont church and fields of snow, and I wrote this. I sat with piles of her letters, photos, hundreds of emails, her music, and a decade of memory. And although I had her generous brother to squeeze my shoulders and tell me, right in my face, thank you, you did it right, you loved her right, I had to learn it for myself. I'm happy for her now. All my grief is just for me, just what I have to pay for having had the privilege of her love, and it's worth it. I'll carry this ache for the rest of my days, and I'll shed tears till I'm ancient, and I'll always be desperately lonely without her. But it will never stop being worth it. And it will never stop being worth it for my brother, excelling in his third year of medical school, for Louis living in Barcelona, married and studying flamenco, for Hugh shouldering the world from his new home with his new love, for Samar fiercely alone and writing her own songs in a bungalow in Connecticut, for Jay running a record shop, for Monty. Sarala's story is composed of the stories of the people who were so fiercely and well loved by her. This is just me and her. Our story is written. And she came back to give me peace. A sleepless night in a Caribbean cabin less than a month after her death, me tossing and turning with the crash of each wave tortured by questions. Whether or not I told her I loved her, whether I did wrong by not fighting her more, whether a plan with me would have saved her, wondering if her last hours were terrible. I got up and smoked her cigarettes and lit a candle by her photo and wrote to her. I asked her to let me know that she was free. When I got back in bed and fell directly asleep, she did. She also told me the most important part, that we still have plenty of time. And when I awoke at dawn, staring out into the sun-blasted, wind-ripped surf of the Caribbean, and I went and I stood on that white sand shore and closed my eyes, put my arms out, and let the sound and fury of this world without her push the tears back from my eyes, I was assured and I was ready, and I will not detain her or my father anymore. They need each other wherever they are, and I need these hands and this heart to build something in this beat-up world. Thanks.
You got through it.
I got through it. How about that?
It's hard for me to even talk about it. I can remember when you got in a hold of me and told me that she was gone. And I'd always hoped for so much more for her, that she could find a place where she belonged. Did you think when she began to work I guess it was her job when she was working in the corporate world. Was her job part of the family business?
Yes, yes, she was like a executive vice president of a large pharmaceutical company, which she did with ease, apparently.
I was going to say that's rather ironic, isn't it?
So Jackie, the thing that comes to mind about that is, she made I write about this in the book a bit, but there was a point where she made a choice to close the door on art.
I know.
She closed the door on writing, on film. She believed it to be too dangerous for her and too painful. And that was just prior to the era that she swung into the saddle of, the corporate world and excelled without any care about it, any care for it. But, and I write this in the book, as I know, Jackie, is like, she didn't stop writing. She just put it into letters and emails. And I was lucky enough to be one of the primary recipients of those. She'd write letters as beautiful as her poems, but she wouldn't acknowledge that she was writing anymore.
Well, you probably understood her as well as anyone in her life and cared for her. And I know we've talked about how if we can get through this whole evening. All the time I'm talking, I have chills going up and down my arms, quite honestly. I think about her a lot, and and as you, I wonder, I felt that I was, doing the best I could, and I did it. I'm so glad that you said that about she felt that we accepted her, because we did.
I know.
And I knew she suffered. And I hope by just letting her know that it made a difference.
It did.
And I'm glad that that you acknowledged that.
That was deeply, deeply human, important palliative care. That's how I look at it now. It's like,
well, maybe this is a good time to share with people some of your feelings and mine about memoir, but also particularly how writing can be healing.
Sure. I'm gonna share a thought, a few words briefly about it, and then I also really, as want to please let anyone out there that's watching or listening, ask questions too.
Yes.
But I guess what I would say about that is that in terms of this book, I'll be really frank, and well, not going to be frank after this writing this fucking book, excuse my language. But it saved my life to write the book. I was I had lost not just but my father, who was my other best friend, also traumatically. And, I was pretty indifferent to whether or not I lived or died. And I was doing things that would have led to the latter. But I knew I had to write this book. And when I finished this book, I knew I was going to live. So that's my personal anecdote. Clinically speaking, the thing about trauma and grief in a way, but certainly traumatic grief, is that it's disjointed, it's fractured, it's everything's out of place. I mean, you think about like PTSD, right? Like for sure, it's like everything is fractured, particularly in the right side of your brain, right? And the way that that is effective to heal trauma is to integrate the story, to take what is a fractured bunch of emotions, images, smells, memories, moments, whatever, and put them into a cohesive narrative into a story. And we do that with EMDR and therapy, and other modalities. And that's what as far as I'm concerned, that's what was doing in writing memoir. So I could say a million more things about that, but I'll defer and see if you have more questions.
Before we let people ask questions, I'd just like to mention that I found writing saved me as well. And one of the things that helped me a great deal, two examples. First of all, the third book I wrote, called Lovesick, is actually based and inspired by the death of a friend of mine in high school. But I had started it one summer when Jack and I were in England, and I put it aside to write the sequel to the first book, Annie's War, the book that's called A Less Than Perfect Peace. And after Jack died, I took the book up again, and I realized that I had really felt grief and come to acknowledge the fact that grief is not linear. And I actually rewrote a great deal of the book because I felt I had a better sense of losing someone that is your whole world. And
It's a beautiful, important thing to say, Jackie. And I don't know if you know this, what I say to my clients now all the time is grief is nonlinear. And that's okay. And I mean, look at me tonight. Like I'm holding it together, but I'm grieving and it's great. But also the opportunity, the tool of putting it into a linear vessel. And maybe it's not even linear, but putting it into a narrative, into a story that holds it,
right,
is that integration and healing.
yeah, exactly. Well, Jill, do you want to open it up for questions?
Yes.
Do we have time, I hope?
Yes, we do. And I just wanted to read one from Professor Jose Calderon in the
Jose
chat.
Calderon.
Jose.
Que viva.
Eli, your descriptions are so poetic and so much about healing. How have you turned your poetic voice and your healing passion into the practice of who you are in your life and what you do now? And then I'll also just tell you, there was a question on one of the registration pages just about kind of how you go about writing a memoir. So, but I wanted to read this one here from Professor Calderon first.
Well, I'm gonna say Jose gave me a softball compared to the other question. I first of all, I appreciate the really kind words, and I have a part that wants to argue with the notion that I did that at all. But I started off wanting to teach writing, and did teach writing when I was getting my MFA for 3 years. It was a 3-year program, and I got to teach creative nonfiction writing to young people. I was 23, they were 19, all of us were young people. And what I found out, in that experience was that what 75% of my students were writing about was trauma and grief. And they were healing from that experience, that integration, which I could say a lot more about. So, that was sort of felt like my calling was like, I'm gonna continue to teach. And I did for a long time. And I taught in a lot of places, domestic violence shelters, and in juvenile detention, psychiatric hospitals for children. But at a certain point, I just became, I wanted a bigger toolbox than just the written word. And so that was sort of what led me to turn towards psychotherapy, so that I would have sort of the tools of that trade, especially the newer and progressive ones, in addition to the tool of writing. I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but if Jose had me as a student, so he knows I probably don't answer questions very directly or will. How to write a memoir? I mean,
Can I
that's too
interrupt?
much. It's too
Eli,
much. Yep.
Okay, well, I scrolled up and saw a comment actually here from, hi, Sydney, class of 91, art history major. I don't know if you want to look in the chat.
Yep.
So I took the majority of my classes at Pomona and Scripps. This book was so wonderful to read because it brought back the best descriptions and memories of Pitzer. It was the little things that brought back such vivid memories. Thank you. It was also obviously heartbreaking and so difficult to read. Unfortunately, I saw my daughter in some of these descriptions.
Thank you, Sydney. That's really meaningful to me to hear. Thank you. I hope that it was healing or positive or supportive for you to read the book.
Okay.
So to totally reverse engineer the question about memoir, I think I would say that, you know, the absolute best part about publishing this book, which is an entirely different issue than writing this book, the whole long story is that, you know, I have heard from people all over the world, you know, most of the United States, but some all over the world is not quite right. But I've heard from hundreds of people that reached out to me on like Facebook Messenger mainly or something like that to say that it helped them, that they connected with it, that it helped them to love or to let go of people in their lives. And like, that's the whole thing, man. You know, there's nothing else I wanted.
Well, I think it's important when people realize by reading something like your book that they're not alone, that they're not some kind of strange creature, that there are other people that have had same kind of experiences. And I think writing it's a great way to you know, sort of deal with your grief as well, because sometimes you don't know what you feel until you write about it.
That's right.
And the more you write, the more you understand and the more you remember.
That's right.
And I know that I've had some writing block recently, and I started writing these short memoir pieces, and it's made all the difference. And I really have fun doing them, and I've been sending them to people. And so I think it's important that we can sometimes deal with our lives by writing about it, and you don't even have to share it. It's just the idea of writing about it.
Yeah.
Are there
Thank you.
other questions?
Yeah, I do have another one that was in a registration page. How do you remain a whole person, not give up a part of your being, yet still be able to compromise and not be a tyrant?
That's a question for you, Eli.
Is it? I'm not sure I understand, Joe, but can you read it again and I'll try?
Sure. How do you remain a whole person, not give up a part of your being, yet still be able to compromise and not be a tyrant?
Wow, there's a philosopher out there. I'm not sure how to respond, except I would say that try to make this bracketed and brief. The form of psychotherapy that I do and that I'm most excited about and moved by is called internal family systems. And I'm not going to nerd out about it a bunch, but what I would say about it is the theory there is that we have a core self, but we are also made up of parts. And those parts accrue over our lifetime. When we get humiliated, when we get traumatized, when we get embarrassed, ashamed, there's a part that carries that. And it's what we would call an exile part. And then right after that comes a protector part that's going to protect that exile for the rest of your life. And will often cease being useful. So when I hear the word tyrant, it makes me think of a protector. and that I probably have my inner tyrant, and that's a part that I'll work with when I get to it.
Sometimes the person that's, hardest on us is ourselves.
Oh, that's the truth.
So, there's a question up there from Mickey, someone.
Mickey Janol says to everyone, it's a simple question, but I thought I'd ask for those that were Pitzer students, what was the one thing that Pitzer taught you to do that you did not possess before Pitzer?
Well, definitely, since you were the student.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking there's a bunch of Pitzer students here, and I'd love to hear their answers. I think.
Right, I would too. I'm sure, I know there's some of my former students out there. Claire Milam, if you're out there, I would like to hear your response.
Everyone feel free to add to the chat.
I think
would be awesome.
If I vamp for a minute and give my answer, I think that for me, my experience at Pitzer, which is, I don't want this to sound critical, but I'm gonna give most of the credit to a small number of professors and colleagues. I mean, classmates and peers. The lesson, ironically, for a small, expensive liberal arts college was humility, for me, and really getting a sense of what it means to be a cisgender, white, mostly heterosexual American male in America. That started, that lesson, that work around that started at Pitzer and because of Pitzer.
Are there any more questions?
I'm not seeing any questions, but I have one, and I'll just say, for me, as I mentioned in my intro, I was first generation, and so had a lot of imposter syndrome here. I did not know a lot of the schools people were from, etc. So, and I would again have to credit faculty, my professors, in giving me the confidence that I belonged here and that my work was good. And that meant I still think back very fondly to any kind of, the positive affirmation about my writing. Actually, I think writing is such a personal thing. It's quite a statement when someone tells you, that they like your writing or they say something very positive about it.
That was Jackie. She did a lot more than that, but that affirmation, Jill, like you have something to say and you have the tools to say it. That was not present in my life before I met Jackie. So.
Well, I really remember watching your writing develop, and it was exciting for me to have a student whose writing, I mean, you really in the beginning, it's a little bit of a struggle, and then all of a sudden you got it. And I can remember when your papers began to show, so much power in the topics and the way you were writing about it. So it's interesting as a professor thinking about, I was thinking about this when I was looking through my grade books today to see, remember some of the students, that how many of my students from all my years at Pitzer I'm still in contact with. And that's very important to me. And I think one of the things that Pitzer made possible. And I mentioned this in the when I put out the first introduction, that I had come from an institution that my first review, I was told that my teaching was too creative. And so and when I got to Pitzer, I had the opportunity to really not only be creative in terms of teaching and developing courses, but also to follow what Pitzer really, encouraged, and that was being close to your students. And it's particularly saved me in many ways since Jack passed away, that to know that there are still students out there whose lives I know about, and their joys and their sorrows and so forth are shared.
Whose lives you positively influenced in ways that are more crucial than you probably know.
Well, thank you, Eli. I know that was true about Jack. I know that he influenced lives. I don't think he even knew how many lives. And so he certainly changed mine. I see things
Me
now. Something from a Linda Miller.
Sydney and Linda. I'll let you read those, Jill.
Sure. So from Sydney, I didn't have a sense of self before Pitzer. I always tried to conform. I came from a conservative community in Missouri, and I didn't even realize that there were people that were different from myself. It was so eye-opening and amazing. I finally felt that I belonged at Pitzer.
Oh, that's good.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Linda wrote, I realized that I had a voice when I was at Pitzer. That was capital letters huge for me at that age. I see that now in retrospect. My mentor was Bert Mayers, the poet and amazing creative writing teacher. I graduated in '72. And then Mickey wants to say something about Jack. Mickey, I'm not sure we know how to make it possible for you to speak, so I think you'll have to write your message in this format. But it's, yeah, the theme of finding one's voice is coming across in the messages, and yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I would just, let's see, here's one. Alice.
Let's Jill,
okay.
let's check in and see if that's something
Okay.
Alice wants to
Okay.
be read publicly or not. Alice,
Okay.
can you comment on that?
Sorry, I didn't see which way it came.
No, that's okay. I just thought
I
it would
see.
be-
Okay.
There it is.
She
Okay.
says, of course. So go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Eli, I have known you to be a seeker of trauma and sometimes darkness. Indeed, it is likely how you found me. Your focus on working toward the solution and not to give up is a torch, a guide for those who come after you. I took classes with Jackie and never amounted to more than mediocre, and was all too happy to give it up completely when I entered the field of emergency medicine. But you did give me the tools to write about the hard stuff and process that which I desperately needed at the time in my life. All my love to both.
Oh, that's so nice.
Nobody remembers Alice Mills as mediocre. Let me tell you that much. Thank you, Alice. That's very
Yeah,
sweet. I can
that
see your
was
face.
sweet.
I can't see your face, but I can see your
No,
face.
I can't either.
Okay, well, and we have just a couple minutes more, and I wanted to just make sure to ask both of you if you wanted to comment on what you're writing right now, or, anything in that area.
Eli, you want
Yeah, sure. I want to say that I've written 7 novels, and none of them have been published. So my fiction is missing something. But I don't give up because I'm a real leatherhead when it comes to, well, if I had talked about the process of getting this book published to speak to it, but I don't give up easily. Though I did give up on those novels. But anyway, I'm gestating a novel right now that is about dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, because I work with that quite a bit. And I just have a exciting semi-plot, but maybe only 2 pages done so far. But that's what I'm looking forward to when I have time. Jackie.
Well, I'm working on, I'm doing these memoir pieces right now, which are a lot of fun. Mostly I did them because I have a writing group and we used to meet on Tuesdays, and during COVID, we couldn't do that. So I sort of lost my energy for working on a novel that I started, which I'm going back to, a young adult novel that takes place in 1973 against Watergate. I like my books for young people to have a historic background because I think it's important for young readers to know what strong shoulders they stand on. And so my first book is in 46, the next one is in 50, and then 53, and the one I'm working on 73. But my last book that I published, Tell the Rain Goodbye, takes place in 84. And that was actually a book I had started. And then my son has, as a profession, has been a fundraiser for nonprofits. And at that time, he was still in LA, and he was telling me about, I had started a novel, and he was telling me one time about the street people, homeless people. In fact, once he wrote something, a very small thing that was in the LA Times about why he gave money to people on the street. And so he sent me a book called about, I imagine it was somebody's dissertation about affluent women who found themselves on the street. Their husbands died and they found they were in debt. And so they were living on the street in their Cadillac or their Mercedes. And so I decided that my character was going to meet one of those women, and it changed the entire direction of the novel. But I did want to talk about the home, that situation. It's against that as a background. So, and my other novel is called Laugh Line, and I'm writing the one that takes place in 73. It's the first time I've written anything with a male character as the main character. And so I actually will confess, I started it in 2012 when I taught my last class. So I had some of my male students read the first chapter to see if they thought I got the voice right. So that's the book I'm going back to. And it's about a young boy who is, the main character is 16, and his father is a famous alcoholic comic. So that's as much as I'll tell you now.
Can't wait.
So, but it's, I really want to thank all of the people that tuned in. And oh, somebody has some questions for me.
Oh, yeah, this is your question, Jackie, your favorite, any good authors and your favorite authors?
Novelists.
Novelists. Okay,
My
thank you.
favorite novelist. Well, I'm sorry, I'm sitting in a room by myself.
Yes.
So I have to move. I can't get the light.
No, there it goes.
I'm not moving enough. Well, I want to mention a novel that I've always thought was important to me, my understanding of people on the margins, and that's a novel called, it's by Claude Brown, called Man-Child in the Promised Land. And that's the first time I can't remember when I read it. I think maybe in late 60s. And it was the first time I understood what it was like for people who lived in a ghetto. And the chapter I remember the most is him. I mean, it was really essentially a memoir, and was the fact that he kept being told to be good, to be a good boy, and being a good boy meant that he could shoplift a dozen eggs so his sister could eat breakfast. And that really that has stayed with me all these years. I also liked Ralph Ellison, and I don't know where I'd begin. I'd have an awfully long list.
And I didn't, and I accidentally did not respond publicly because I don't know how this works, but Benjamin Percy, Ivy Pachota, Carmen Machado, Russell Banks, Octavia Butler. That's what I got for novelists.
Well, I have a whole list, but I take up too much time. So, but those two are authors that I admired a great deal. And also Tobias Wolff, who came to the college once, and I actually was delighted that I was able to talk to him about writing.
Well, thank you so much. We've come to the end of our time so fast, but I want to thank you both, to Eli and Jackie, for speaking. Your honesty, your vulnerability, and your ability to talk about the power of writing, how it helps us retrace times in our past, understand the feelings and the grief that we hold, and to celebrate the love we have in our lives. And thank you to the Pitzer audience for being part of this evening.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we really
Thank you guys.
yeah. Ditto, trippo. We appreciate your participation, and know that this event will be on Pitzer at Home, probably by the start of next week.
Oh, good, because people ask me about that.
Yeah, and there's so many thank yous in the chats to both of you. So yes.
Just very briefly, Joe, like I genuinely mean it when I say that if anybody can, for any reason, can always reach out to me. I'm easy to find. And that's meaningful to me, as I said before. So like, don't be strangers, even if you are at this point.
Well, anyone who would like to can get a hold of me too. It's easy. Every once in a while I Google myself, and I'm surprised at how the things, it even mentions acknowledgement sometimes, that I'm, somebody's acknowledged me or something. So you can get more information than you ever want to know. So, but if anybody would like to, to talk to me, to get in touch with me, former students, that would be delightful.
Great.
So good night, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks for being with us. And Eli, I send love and hugs.
I love you too, Jackie. We'll talk soon.
I hope so.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Night.